So good day everyone. So for today's discussion, we will talk about the electromagnetic induction. So let's begin first by setting our learning goals. So first, we need to analyze how Faraday's law relates the induced EMF in a loop to the change in magnetic flux through the loop. Second is to understand how to determine the direction of an induced EMF. Then third is to determine how a changing magnetic flux generates a circulating electric field. Then fourth one is to recall the four fundamental equations that completely describe both electricity and magnetism. And lastly is to appreciate the remarkable electric and magnetic properties of superconductors. So notice how these goals move from experiment to loss to unification and lastly to application. So that's the arc of our lesson. So turn to your neighbor and brainstorm. So which of these goals do you think connects most directly to everyday technology? For example, credit cards, generators, or maglev trains. So let's begin here with the card reader. So the card reader at a gas station scans the information that is coded in a magnetic pattern on the back of your card. So why must you remove the card quickly rather than hold it motionless in the card reader's slot? So energy conversions make use of electromagnetic induction. Then Faraday's law and Lenz's law tells us about induced currents. So Maxwell's equations describe the behavior of electric and magnetic fields in any situation. So going back, imagine swiping your card at a gas station. So why must you remove it quickly instead of holding it still? So it's because induction requires change. A stationary card produces no change in magnetic flux, so no EMF or electromotive force is induced. So this principle can be everywhere. For example, in generators, coils rotate in magnetic fields to produce electricity. Second, in transformers, changing currents induce voltages in nearby coils. And then lastly, for wireless charging, alternating magnetic fields induce currents in your phone. So that's the application of this concept. So Faraday discovered induction. Lenz explained its direction, and Maxwell uh, unified this all mathematically. So today, we'll retrace their steps and see how these ideas power modern life. So kindly, raise your hand if you have used wireless charging or seen a maglev train video. So if you have done so, then that's induction at work. So let's go back to the 1830s. So several pioneering experiments with magnetically induced EMF were carried out. Faraday connected a coil of wire to a galvanometer as shown in the figure. So when a nearby magnet was stationary, the meter showed no current and nothing happened. So this was puzzling at first. So why wouldn't a magnet which clearly has a field produce current just by being near the coil? So what is the key discovery here? So the key discovery is that motion matters. A static magnetic field produces no induced current and only changes in flux matter. So we have here a problem example, which is a simple example of the application of this concept. So suppose a magnet produces a field of zero point 0.1 Tesla through a coil of area 0.02 meters squared. So remember that the unit for for magnetic field rather is in Tesla. So if the magnet is stationary, what is the induced EMF? So now we need to solve this problem. So in order to find the flux, we need to what we call it multiply the magnetic flux to the area. So first, we need to multiply the magnetic field to the area. So magnetic field is symbolized by letter B and area is symbolized by uppercase letter A. So substituting all the values, so we have the magnetic field 0.1 Tesla, then multiply by the area 0.02. Sorry for the penmanship. 0.02 meters squared. So what will be our unit? So remember that the unit for flux is in Weber. So the result of this will be 0.002. So our flux will be 0.002 Weber. So we need to find the EMF. So since the flux is constant, so the EMF or the electromotive force will be zero. Why so? So we need to find it. We need to prove it rather. So we have here the change in the magnetic flux over the change of time is equal to zero. Therefore, our EMF is zero. So even though the flux exists, no current flows without change. So why do you think Faraday emphasized motion in his experiments? So kindly discuss it with your peers. So let's move on. So now Faraday moved the magnet toward or away from the coil. So suddenly the galvanometer needle deflected. Current appeared, but only while the magnet was moving. So this was revolutionary. It showed that EMF is linked to change in flux and not flux itself. The induced current is temporary, existing only during motion. Once the motion stops, current vanishes. So we have here another simple problem example. So a magnet increases flux through a coil from 0.002 Weber to 0.006 Weber in zero point 0.5 seconds. So find the induced EMF. So first we need to find the change. We need first to find the change in the flux. So in order to find it, so we need to subtract 0.006 to 0.002 Weber, in which these two are the magnetic flux. So we will get the change in the flux is equal to 0.004 Weber. So we need to find then the EMF. So we need to divide or get the ratio of the change in magnetic flux over the change of time. This is the change of magnetic flux over the change of time. So substituting the values, so we have 0.004 Weber over the time, which is 0.5 0.5 seconds. So we will get 0.000. Sorry for the penmanship. So what will be our unit? It is in voltage. So remember that the unit for EMF is voltage. So now we got 0.008 volts. So now let's move on to another concept. So Faraday replaced the magnet with a second coil connected to a battery. So when he moved the second coil toward or away from the first, current appeared in the first coil. So again, only relative motion mattered. So this showed that induction isn't about magnets alone. So it's about changing flux, whether from magnets or currents. So we have here another simple problem example about this concept. Suppose the second coil produces a field that changes flux in the first coil by 0.01 Weber in 0.2 seconds. So what EMF is induced? So again, we need to find again, in order to find the EMF, we need to divide the flux to the time. I mean the change in flux to the change of time. But since we only have one flux here, which is the given in the problem, so we need to divide it directly. So 0.01 Weber over 0.2 seconds. So what is the answer? We will get 0.05 volts. Again, the unit for um, EMF is in voltage. So when we convert it into meter volts or MV, we will get 50 MV. So this will be our final answer. So therefore, the induced EMF is in 50 meter volts. So kindly turn to your peer. So what's the difference between using a magnet against a coil to induce current? Which is more practical in technology? So kindly think of it. So now we'll move on to another induction experiment. So finally, Faraday kept both coils stationary but varied the current in the second coil by opening and closing a switch. The first coil showed current only while the second coil's current was changing. And this proved the principle. Induction on uh, de depends on changing magnetic flux, whether from motion or changing current. So we have here another simple problem example. So if the current in the second coil changes, so the flux in the first coil decreases by 0.02 Weber, which is the flux, and then in 0.1 seconds. So what EMF is induced? So, this is the same with the previous one. So let's divide the let's define the flux to the time. So, but since there's only one flux given, so no need to get the change in flux. Just go directly by dividing the flux to the time. So we will get 0.2 volts. So therefore, wait, So therefore, 0.2 volts is induced during the change. So we have a quick poll. So does induction require magnets, or can it happen with just coils and currents? So kindly think of it and discuss with your peers. Now, moving on. So we are now in a coil in a magnetic field. So here we see a coil placed in a magnetic field. If the magnetic field is constant and the coil's shape, location, and orientation do not change, there is no current induced. This is a critical point. Induction requires change. So think of it like sunlight through a window. If the sun's brightness and angle remain constant, the amount of light through the window doesn't change. But if clouds pass or the window tilts, the amount of light changes. So similarly, flux must change for induction to occur. And thus, that makes sense. So we have here another simple problem example. So a coil of area 0.1 square meter sits in a zero point 0.2 Tesla, which is the magnetic field. If the coil is stationary and the field is constant, what EMF is induced? So first and foremost, we need to find the flux by multiplying the magnetic field to the area. So substituting the values, we have 0.2 Tesla multiplied to the area, which is 0.1 meter squared. So we will get 0.02, and the unit will be Weber. Weber is the unit for flux. But since flux is constant, so when we divide the change in flux to the change of time, especially there is no time given, so therefore, obviously the EMF is equal to 0. So even though flux exists, no current flows. So the electromotive force will be equal to 0. So turn to your peer. So kindly ask him or her what practical device relies on changing coil orientation to generate current. So I'll give you a hint. So think of it like in turbines, and you will get the answer. So moving on to the magnetic flux. So to define magnetic flux, we can divide any surface into the elements of area, represented by dA. So magnetic flux is the measure of how much magnetic field passes through a surface. Mathematically, the magnetic flux to the area element is defined to be um, the magnetic flux is equal to magnetic field times the elements of area. So for a flat surface, this simplifies to uh, wait. So for a flat surface, this simplifies to the magnetic flux is equal to magnetic field times the area, then cosine theta. So that's the simplification of this formula in a flat surface. So we have here simple problem example. So a coil of area 0.05 meters squared is placed in a 0.3 Tesla, which is the flux, field at 30 degrees, which is the angle. So we need to find the flux. So remember the formula. So in order to find the flux, magnetic flux rather, we need to, sorry, wait, my drawing is my penmanship is kind of messy. Sorry for that. So we have here the magnetic flux is equal to, again, magnetic field times the area, sorry for the penmanship again, then cosine theta. So this theta here is the degree. So substituting the values, so we have, what is the magnetic field? We have 0.3 Tesla, then times or multiplied to 0.05 meter squared, then also multiply to the cosine 30 degrees. So we have here the angle. So in order to multiply this, so just multiply all the values directly to get the final answer. So we will get 0.013 Weber. Again, the unit for flux is Weber. So therefore, our magnetic flux will be 0.013 Weber. So try to sketch a rectangle and draw magnetic field lines through it. So rotate it slowly and kindly observe what happens to the number of lines crossing for a while. So the maximum flux occurs when the surface is face onto the magnetic field. So in this case, the flux will be magnetic field times the area. So as you can see here in the illustration, the magnetic field and the area are parallel. The angle between the magnetic field and the area is equal to 0. So the magnetic flux will be the product of the magnetic field and the area. So try to solve this problem. So a coil of area 0.2 meters squared in a 0.4 Tesla field face on. So find flux. So again, to find the flux, we need to simply multiply the magnetic field to the area. So we have 0.4 Tesla times 0.2 meters squared. I'll just go directly with the computation since we need to divide it only, multiply both values. So we will get 0.4 times 0.2 is equal to 0.08 Weber. Apology for the environment, it's kinda noisy. So let's try a quick check. So if you double the area of the coil, what happens to flux? Does it become bigger, smaller, or the same? So it's up to you to find out the answer for this. So let's move on to the magnetic flux through a flat area. So when the surface is at some angle relative to the magnetic field, the magnetic flux is between 0 and the product of magnetic field and the area. So you can see here the surface is tilted from a face-on orientation. So when the surface is tilted, the flux decreases. So the formula will be the magnetic flux is equal to the magnetic field times the area, or the product of magnetic field and the area cosine theta. So think of sunlight hitting a tilted solar panel. So of course, there will be less light absorbed, and same with flux. So we have here a problem example for this. So a coil of area 0.1 meter squared and 0.5 Tesla tilted at 60 degrees. So find the flux. So again and again, we just need to multiply the magnetic field to the area in order to find the magnetic flux. So 0.5 Tesla, the magnetic field, times the area, which is 0.1 meter squared. Then cosine 60 degrees. So what is the answer? So we will get 0.025 Weber. Therefore, our magnetic flux is 0.025 Weber. So kindly predict at 90 degrees what happens to the flux. Kindly discuss it with your peer. So moving on. So when the surface is edged on to the magnetic field, no field lines pass through the surface, as what can we see in the figure. This is like turning a window sideways to the sun and no light enters. So the problem example here states that a coil of area 0.2 meters squared and a 0. Tesla field edge on. So the flux is 0. Why so? Since no field line passed to the surface, therefore no light enters. Therefore, the flux will be 0. So let's think, pair, and share. So why does flux vanish at 90 degrees? So what does this tell us about coil orientation in generators? So kindly search it for yourself. So, when the magnetic flux through a single closed loop changes with time, there is an induced EMF that can drive a current around the loop. So, we have here the formula for Faraday's law, which is the induced EMF in a closed loop is equal to the product of the distance and the magnetic field over the change of time, or the rate of change of time of magnetic flux through the loop. So recall that the unit of magnetic flux is the Weber. So 1 Tesla is equal to, 1 Tesla meter squared is equal to 1 Weber. So Tesla and meter squared is the breakdown units for Weber. So 1 volts is equal to 1 Weber over seconds. So units for 1 Weber per second is equal to 1 volt. So we have here another problem example. A coil of area 0.05 meters squared in a 0.2 field rotates from face on to edge on in 0.1 seconds. So we have the initial flux, which is again the product of the initial flux is simply the product of the magnetic field, which is the magnetic field, which is 0.2 Tesla multiplied to the area 0.05 meters squared. So this is equal to 0.011 Weber. So the final flux will be 0. So the change is equal to negative 0.01 Weber. So the EMF, again, to find the EMF, we need to divide the change in flux over the change of time. So we have here the change of flux, 0.01 Weber over 0.1 seconds, which is the time. So therefore, we will get 0.1 volts. So therefore, the EMF is 0.1 volts. So 0.1 EMF is induced. So predict if the rotation time is half, then what happens to the EMF? Does it become bigger, smaller, or the same? So find it for yourself. So let's move on to determining the direction of the induced EMF. So as based on the figure, Faraday's law tells us that the magnitude of the induced EMF, but not its direction. To figure out the direction, we need Lenz's law. So Lenz's law states that the induced current will always oppose the change in magnetic flux that produces it. So this means nature resists change. If flux increases, the induced current produces a magnetic field to oppose that increase. So if flux decreases, the induced current produces a magnetic field to try to restore it. So let's explain it with a simple analogy. So imagine pushing a child on a swing. So the swing resists doesn't sudden changes in motion. The swing resists sudden changes in motion. Similarly, in the screen, resists changes in flux. So can you turn to your peer? If the magnetic field through a coil is increasing upward, which way will the induced current flow? Does it go clockwise or does it move counterclockwise? So find it for yourself. So moving on. So let's apply Lenz's law step by step. So first is to identify whether flux is increasing or decreasing. So we have here another scenario as shown in the figure in which the magnetic field is decreasing. And then ask what magnetic field would oppose that change. So use the right-hand rule again in the figure. We need to use the right-hand rule to determine the current direction that produces the opposing field. So we have here a simple simple scenario. So a coil lies flat in a magnetic field pointing upward. So the field strength increases. So which way is the induced current? So to answer that question, the flux is increasing upward. So to oppose, the coil must produce a downward field. And then using the right-hand rule, downward field requires what direction? It requires clockwise current. So try this with your hand. Point your thumb downward, then curl your fingers. Which way do they curl? That's the current direction. So moving on. So a coil lies flat in a magnetic field pointing upward. the field strength decreases, which way is the induced current. So remember that the flux is decreasing upward. So to oppose, the coil must produce an upward field. So using the right-hand rule, the upward field requires counterclockwise current. So let's have a quick check. If flux decreases, does the induced current try to restore it or reduce it further? So kindly discuss it with your peer. So moving on. So let's summarize. So when there is increasing flux, therefore the induced current produces opposing field. But if the flux is decreasing, therefore the induced current produces reinforcing field. So this ensures conservation of energy. So if induced currents didn't oppose changes, we could create energy from nothing. So we have here a scenario of this summarization of the concepts in determining the direction of the induced EMF. So a coil in a horizontal magnetic field experiences flux decreasing to zero. So kindly predict current direction. So remember that the flux is decreasing. So the coil produces field in same direction to restore it. And the current direction is determined by right-hand rule. So let's think, pair, and share. Lenz's law guarantee energy does Lenz's law guarantee energy conservation? What would happen if induced currents help the change instead of opposing it? So moving forward with the Faraday's law for a coil. So a commercial alternator uses many loops of wire wound around a barrel-like structure called an armature, and the resulting induced electromotive force is far larger than would be possible with a single loop of wire. If a coil has n identical turns, in which the letter n here symbolizes or represents the number of loops, and if the flux varies at the same rate through each turn, the total EMF is represented by this formula. So we have here the EMF is equal to negative the number of loops and then multiplied with the uh, ratio of the magnetic flux over the time. So more turns is equal to more EMF. So this is why generators and alternators use thousands of turns. So we have here a problem example for this. So a coil with 100 turns experiences flux change of 0.02 Weber, in which the 0.02 Weber here is the flux in zero point 0.1 second. Then find EMF. So again, using the formula EMF, sorry for the noise, unnecessary noise within my environment. So we have negative n, which is the number of loops, then the change of flux over the change of time. So this is just a simple problem example. So let's substitute all the values following the formula. We have 100, in which the 100 here, the number of turns or the number of loops, then multiplied with the ratio or the fraction of the magnetic flux over the time. So 0.02 divided by 0.1 is equal to negative 20 volts. So the coil produces 20 volts. I mean negative 20 volts. But since In finding EMF, we need to get the positive value. So therefore the EMF is 20 volts. So kindly discuss. So why do power plants prefer many turns instead of just increasing magnetic field strength? So kindly find it for yourself. So Lenz's law is a convenient method for determining the direction of an induced current or EMF. So the direction of any magnetic induction effect is such as to oppose the cause of the effect. So example, in the figure, there is a uniform magnetic field through the coil. So a coil in a uniform magnetic field with increasing magnitude, this induced EMF drives a current that produces a field opposing the increase. So the magnitude of the field is increasing, so there is an induced EMF driving a current as shown in the figure below. So we have here another problem example for this concept. So a coil in a zero point 0.5 Tesla, which is the magnetic field, experiences flux increasing at 0.01 Weber per second. What EMF is induced if the coil has 50 turns? So using the formula again, I'll just go directly with the computation. EMF is equal to the number of loops, which is 50 turns, then multiplied to the ratio of the magnetic field. Magnetic field 0.5 Tesla over 0.01 second. So therefore, the EMF is equal to negative 0.5 voltage. So the direction is that the current produces opposing field. So kindly predict, if flux decreases instead, what direction will the current be? So share it with your peer. So moving on to the Lenz's law and the direction of induced current. So based on the figure, we see a coil in a magnetic field, and the field strength is changing. According to Lenz's law, the induced current will always oppose the change in flux. If the magnetic field is increasing upward, the coil produces a downward field, as shown on the figure on the left side. If the field is decreasing, then the coil produces an upward field. So this is simply the nature's way of conserving energy. So the coil resists the change. So now let's consider the opposite case. So what if the flux is decreasing? So if the magnetic field through the coil decreases, the coil produces a field in the same direction to restore it. So let's try to have a quick check. So does the induced current always oppose the flux itself or the change in flux? So which is which? So another way to induce EMF is by moving a conductor through a magnetic field. As shown in the diagram, this is called the motional EMF. So the formula for this will be the EMF is equal to the magnetic field times the length and the speed of the conductor. So where B is the field strength, the L is the length of the conductor, and V is the velocity perpendicular to the field. So let's explain this or describe this in a simple analogy. So imagine I'm sweeping sweeping a rod through a magnetic field. So Obviously, it charges inside the rod experience a force and separate, creating a voltage. So, predict if the rod moves parallel to the field, what happens to the electromotive force? Does it become bigger, smaller, uh, or zero? So, let's move on to the induced electric fields. So you can see here a long thin solenoid is encircled by a circular conducting loop. So the electric field in the loop is what must drive the current. When the solenoid or the current, when the solenoid current changes with time, the magnetic flux also changes, and the induced EMF can be written in terms of the induced electric field. So Faraday's law can also be expressed in terms of induced electric fields. So a changing magnetic flux creates a circulating electric field which drives current in a loop. So this is different from electrostatics here. The electric field is non-conservative, meaning it doesn't come from changes but from changing magnetic fields. So we have here a simple problem. A solenoid's current changes so the flux through a loop decreases at 0.05 Weber per second. So what average electric field is induced around a circular loop of radius 0.1 meter? So let's find the average electric field. So remember, in order to find the EMF, we need to divide the change in flux to the change of time, in which the change of flux is 0.01 Weber per second. So we have no given time, so simply our EMF will be 0.05 volts. So what is the circumference? So since this is a circular loop, so remember the formula for circumference of a circle is 2 pi r, 2 pi r. So we will get 0.6 to 0.628 meter. So what is the average electric field? So to find this, we need to divide the EMF value to the value of the circumference. So 0.05 volts over 0.628 which is the circumference. So therefore, we will get 0.08 volts per meter. So our unit will be volts per meter since there will be no cancellation of units involved. So let's think, pair, and share. So if changing the magnetic field creates an average electric field, and changing the E creates B, what does that imply about waves in space? So that's an interesting scenario. So let's move on to the eddy currents. So when a piece of metal moves through a magnetic field or is located in a changing magnetic field, the eddy currents of current are induced. So what are eddy currents? So this refers to the loops of current that form within the conductor itself. So they oppose the motion that created them, again following the Lenz's law. So the metal detectors used at airport security checkpoints operate by detecting eddy currents induced in metallic objects, as shown in the diagram on the right side. So another application will be airport security detectors, and then induction cooktops in which the eddy currents hit the pan directly, and then also in roller coaster brakes in which magnets induce eddy currents in metal pins, slowing the ride safely. So we have here a problem example for this. So a metal plate moves into a magnetic field region at 2 meters per second. The changing flux induces eddy currents that dissipate 10 Weber of power as heat. Watts. What does this tell us about conser energy conservation? So simply the answer for this is that kinetic energy of the plate is converted into heat via eddy currents. So therefore, these eddy currents are um, directly related to the concept of conservation of energy. So why do roller coasters use eddy current brakes instead of friction brakes? So what advantages do they have? So let's move on to the displacement current. So the Ampere's law is incomplete, as can be shown by considering the process of charging a capacitor as shown. So for the plane circular area bounded by the circle, which is current enclosed is the current in the left conductor. But the surface that bulges out to the right is bounded by the same circle, and the current through that surface is zero, and this leads to a contradiction. So remember that Ampere's law states that magnetic fields are produced by currents, but charging a capacitor revealed a contradiction. Imagine a capacitor being charged. Current flows into one plate, but between the plates, there is no conduction current. Yet, a magnetic field exists around the warts. So this seems inconsistent. How can Ampere's law apply if there is no current between the plates? So turn to your fear. If no changes move between the plates, how can a magnetic field exist there? So when a capacitor is charging, the electric field is increasing between the plates. We can define a fictitious displacement current represented by lowercase I and then uppercase B in the region between the plates. And this can be regarded as the source of the magnetic field between the plates. So we have here the formula, which is the displacement current is equal to the permittivity of material in area, then multiplied by the fraction of the electric flux through the area over the rate of change of the time. So Maxwell resolved this by introducing the concept of displacement current. So when a capacitor charges, the electric field between the plates increases. So Maxwell defined a fictitious current proportional to the rate of change of this electric field. And this displacement current produces the magnetic field between the plates, making the Ampere's law consistent. So we have here a simple problem example for this. So we have a capacitor with plate area of 0.01 square meter and separation 1 millimeter is charged so that the electric field increases at 2 times 10 to the power of 6 voltmeters. So we need to find the displacement current. So using the formula, displacement current ID is equal to the permittivity in then multiplied with the fraction of the magnetic flux field over the change of time or the rate of time. So let's substitute all the values. So we have um remember that the permittivity value is constant. So we have 8.85 8.85 times 10 times 10 to the power of negative 12 f over n. Then multiply to the fraction of the electric field. So we have 2 times 10, 2 times 10 to the power of 6 v over n. Then the time. But since we don't have a time given here, so let's have this 0. So we will get 1.77 times 1.77 times 10 to the power of negative 5 ampere over meter squared. So therefore, the total displacement current is 1.77 times 10 to the power of negative 5. So times 0.01. So this is times 0.01, which is the area given in the problem. So we will get 1 point, sorry, 1.77 times 10 to the power of negative 7 ampere. So remember that the unit for current is ampere. So let's discuss why was Maxwell's displacement current idea revolutionary for unifying electricity and magnetism. So let's move on to the Maxwell's equation of electromagnetism. So all the relationships between electric and magnetic fields and their sources are summarized by 4 equations called the Maxwell's equation. So the first Maxwell equation is Gauss' law for electric fields from chapter 22. The second Maxwell equation is Gauss' law for magnetic fields from chapter 27. So for the first equation is simply the product of the electric field times the area. But for the second, it is the product of the magnetic field times the change of the area. So Maxwell summarized all of electromagnetism in 4 equations. So we have Gauss' law for electric fields and Gauss' law for magnetic fields, in which the Gauss' law for electric fields states that the electric flux through a surface is proportional to enclosed charge, while the Gauss' law for magnetic fields states that magnetic flux through a closed surface is always zero and no magnetic monopoles. These two laws describe sources in which the charges produces electric fields but magnetic fields have no isolated sources. So let's try to have a quick check. So why do we say magnetic monopoles don't exist? So what would it mean if they did? So we have here the third Maxwell equation from the formulation of Faraday's law, which is the product of the electric field and the length. While the fourth Maxwell equation is Ampere's law, including displacement current, which is the product of the magnetic field times the length is equal to the magnetic constant multiplied to the conduction current through path plus the electric constant times the change of electric flux over the rate of time in an enclosed system. So the third equation is Faraday's law, in which it states that a changing magnetic flux induces an EMF or equivalently a circulating electric field, while the fourth one is Ampere's law with Maxwell's correction. Currents and changing electric fields produce magnetic fields. So together, these four equations unify electricity and magnetism. So again, the first law is for electric fields, the second is the Gauss law for magnetic fields, the third one is Faraday's law, and the fourth one is the Ampere's law. So we have here a simple problem example. So suppose a magnetic flux through a loop changes at 0.1 Weber per second. So what EMF is induced? So no need to solve, of course, there are no other given, so therefore the EMF is equal to 0.1 volts. And this is Faraday's law in action. So let's think, care, and share. Which of Maxwell's equation directly predicts electromagnetic waves? So we have here Maxwell equations in empty space. There is a remarkable symmetry in Maxwell's equation. In empty space where there is no change, the first two equations are identical in form. The third equation says that a changing magnetic flux create an electric field, and the fourth says that a changing electric flux creates a magnetic field. So in Gauss law, for electric field, no changes, so the flux is equal to zero. And for Gauss law for magnetic field, there will be no monopoles, so the flux is zero. For Faraday's law, which is the third law, changing magnetic field creates an electric field. While for the fourth one, the Ampere's law, it states that changing the electric field creates a magnetic field. So this symmetry predicts self-sustaining electromagnetic waves, which is light itself. So kindly discuss with your peer, how does the idea that light is an electromagnetic wave change our view of physics? So let's move on to the superconductivity in a magnetic field. So superconductivity is one of the most remarkable phenomena in physics. When certain materials are cooled below a critical temperature, they lose all electrical resistance, and the current can flow indefinitely without energy loss. So, but superconductivity is sensitive to magnetic fields. For any superconducting material, the critical temperature decreases as the external magnetic field increases, and this means strong magnetic fields that can destroy superconductivity. So let's describe it with a simple analogy. So think of a superconductivity like a delicate balance. So cooling stabilizes it, but magnetic fields destabilize it. So let's have a problem example. So suppose a mercury has a critical temperature of 4.2 Kelvin at zero field. If an external field of 0.1 T lowers to 3.8 Kelvin, what is the change? So simply, in order to find the change of the temperature, let's just get the, I mean, let's subtract both temperatures. So the change of temperature, so we have 4.2, I think I'm mistaken. Sorry. Again, the change. Oh, I think I forgot the problem. Okay, going back. So we have here the change of time, the change of temperature. So just subtract both temperatures from 4.2, 4.2 Kelvin minus 3.8 Kelvin. So the change of time will be 0.4 Kelvin. So even in a modest field, reduces the transition temperature, in which the transition temperature is 0.4 Kelvin. So why might superconductors is difficult to use in everyday electronics if magnetic fields can suppress them? So let's move on to the Meissner effect. So the Meissner effect is the defining property of superconductors. When a material becomes superconducting, it expels all magnetic flux from its interior. This makes superconductors perfect for diamagnets. Unlike ordinary conductors, which allow magnetic fields to penetrate, superconductors push them out entirely. So, in a simple analogy, imagine a sponge that suddenly becomes waterproof. Water can no longer enter. Similarly, magnetic flux is expelled. So we have here a problem example. A superconducting sphere is placed in a uniform magnetic field of 0.05 Tesla. After cooling below temperature, what is the magnetic field inside the sphere? So of course the answer is 0 Tesla. The Meissner effect expels all the flux. So why is the Meissner effect more than just zero resistance? What does flux expulsion add to our understanding? So the Meissner effect makes a superconductor a perfect diamagnet. A paramagnetic material is attracted by a permanent magnet because the magnetic dipoles in the material align with the non-uniform magnetic field of the permanent magnet. So because of the Meissner effect, superconductors repel magnetic fields, and this makes them perfect diamagnets. In contrast, paramagnetic materials are attracted to magnets, while diamagnetic materials are repelled, and superconductors take diamagnetism to the extreme. So the application for this is that maglev chains, frictionless travel at high speeds, magnetic bearings, which reduce wear in machinery, and quantum computing, which is superconducting circuit with zero resistance. So we have here a problem example. A magnet of mass 0.05 kilogram levitates above a superconductor. If the repulsive force equals weight, what force is required? So this is just a simple uh, problem. So we need to find the force. So F is equal to mg, in which the mass is equal to 0.05 kilogram times 9.8. in which 9.8 is the constant value for gravity, meter per second. This is kilogram. Meter per second squared rather. So we will get 0.49 Newton. So therefore, our force is 0.49 Newton, in which Newton here is the unit for force. So what advantages would a levitating train have compared to a traditional train? So think of it like speed, energy, and maintenance. So that will be all for our discussion, and thank you for listening.